couple of years ago, the Japanese government locked up Carlos Ghosn, the former CEO of the Renault-Nissan Mitsubishi alliance. They put him in jail. He was in prison. No heater. Apparently it was very cold in there. He eventually got put in house arrest. And then he organised a party. He had some musicians come around to his house. One of them was carrying an extra large musical case. Instruments only, of course. Now the weird thing was, that musician left Carlos Ghosn's apartment without the musical instruments that were meant to be in that case. And that made the police think to themselves, something is going on here. Well, Carlos Ghosn escaped, of course, in that instrument case. Some Israeli soldiers, or former soldiers, and a US former paratrooper, and a former US military worker apparently managed to smuggle him out of Japan, and he escaped many years of prison. Why do I say many years of prison? Well, because the conviction rate in Japan is 99%. I kid you not. This is not some YouTube fact. This is true. If you get accused of a crime in Japan and then it goes to court, you have a 1% chance of winning. Some democracy, that is. Well, now, Nissan's former CEO, who has been hiding out in his home country of Lebanon, is suing Nissan for $1.6 billion. Why is he doing it now? He's doing it now because Nissan's illegal practices have been exposed. And now, courts around the world are much more likely to believe what Carlos has been saying all along. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. It's great to see you. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Sam Evans, and I'm the Electric Viking. Carlos Ghosn, it's a curious case. I've read hundreds of pages of documents on this case, and I believe that not only Carlos, but the other Western executives who were put in prison by the Japanese government, who have only just recently been released, and I believe one of them is still in prison, I believe they were all innocent as well. The man once faded as a corporate superhero for basically reinventing Nissan and Renault and Mitsubishi, bringing them out of the doldrums, out of a position of very, very poor position financially into a strong one, is now suing his former employee, or former employer, I should say, for over US $1 billion. Carlos Ghosn is back in the headlines, and in my opinion, the reason is because Nissan just exposed themselves as the joke of a company they are. Now, Nissan's debt is rated junk. Junk. It's the only Japanese automotive company with debt rated as junk. Nissan have lost money for years. The only reason they made a profit last year was because of the devaluation of the yen versus the US dollar. Nissan, in my opinion, is on its last legs. Nissan's former COO was tailed and surveilled illegally, even in his own house, by Nissan. The CEO endorsed this project. They wanted to find anything on him that they could because they were afraid that he was angling to be the next CEO. Now, this was the guy that actually helped Nissan to sort of restabilize its financial position. And he's from India. So is one of the other workers who was illegally surveilled by Nissan as well. Now, Nissan had no cause whatsoever to install hidden cameras in his house and hire private detectives to follow him around. And nothing was found to prove that he'd done anything wrong. But they did it anyway. Overnight, Carlos Ghosn filed a lawsuit in Lebanon seeking $588 million in lost earnings and costs and $500 million in punitive damages. In the lawsuit, Ghosn alleges the serious and sensitive accusations made against the former CEO will linger in people's minds for years. As a result, Ghosn will suffer from them for the remainder of his life as they have persistent and lingering impacts, even if based on mere suspicion. And Carlos is right. Whether or not he's guilty or not, I don't think anyone truly knows, but I believe that most people thought, Well, if Nissan said it happened, it must have happened. If Japan locked him up, he must be guilty. Carlos has a point here. He was never going to get a fair trial. And now that Nissan looks like they're actually possibly guilty, well, what better time than for Carlos to come forward and say, look, I told you so. You should have listened to me. This is the kind of shenanigans. This is the kind of tomfoolery. This is the kind of sensational nonsense that goes on at Nissan's corporate headquarters. The filing names a number of Nissan employees, including executives and board members, as well as Toshiaki Onuma, a manager in the CEO's office, and Hari Nada, a senior vice president who was instrumental in many of Ghosn's alleged financial crimes and who negotiated a plea deal to become a state witness. A judge has set the first hearing date for Ghosn's suit for September this year. It's possible Lebanese authorities will seek help from their Japanese counterparts, but it's unclear whether that will be forthcoming. I would say probably not. Ghosn is a fugitive from Japan, and Lebanon doesn't have an extradition treaty with Japan. Thus, he's therefore free to live his life as normal in Lebanon. But outside of Lebanon, it's a different story. Ghosn was dramatically arrested in November 2018 after arriving in Tokyo for a Nissan board meeting. He was charged with underreporting his pay, temporarily transferring investment losses to Nissan, and a shady deal with a Middle Eastern importer that reportedly netted him US $5 million. He fled home detention at the end of 2019 and was smuggled aboard a private jet bound for Turkey in an instrument case. He then transferred to a plane headed for Beirut in Lebanon, where he lives to this day. Born in Brazil to Lebanese parents, Ghosn holds citizenship in both Brazil and Lebanon, as well as in France, where he studied and began his automotive career working at Renault. He worked his way up the ranks, became CEO of Renault, and the rest is history. As there's no extradition treaty between Lebanon and Japan, Ghosn will remain at large, but of course he's trapped in Lebanon. After completing 2 degrees in Paris, Ghosn joined Michelin in 1978. He quickly rose through the ranks and became the Brazilian Arms COO by 1984. After turning around the Brazilian branch and running the North American division, Ghosn joined Renault in 1996. Through aggressive restructuring, he turned around Renault's South American operations, but earned the nickname the Cost Killer or Le Cost Killer. When in 1999, Renault purchased a controlling stake in Nissan, which was drowning in billions of dollars, $55 billion US in debt, and that was a long time ago, 24 years ago, Ghosn was parachuted in as COO. With the situation on its knees, Ghosn didn't adhere to Japanese corporate traditions, which valued jobs for life and close bonds between affiliated firms. What he did was unforgivable in Japan. What he did was the only economically sensible thing to do. After firing 1/7 of its workforce in Japan, closing factories, renegotiating supplier contracts, and culling the company's sprawling and largely bland product range, Nissan was soon back in the black, and Ghosn was promoted to CEO. But a lot of people were angry, very angry. They harbored deep mistrust. They were afraid that they would lose their jobs as well. In 2009, Ghosn added CEO of Renault to his growing roll of job titles and oversaw an unwieldy alliance between the two firms. Renault had a 44% voting stake in Nissan, and Nissan in turn had a 15% stake in voting at Renault. Tensions between the two partners grew over the years, especially as Nissan became the dominant generator of profits and sales, and many in Nissan began to suspect Ghosn or the French government, which owned a 15% stake in Renault, wanted to merge the two automakers. Once that merging was announced, everything began to fall to pieces. And this is when the attacks from Nissan came. It was in this climate of suspicion and fear that Ghosn and Greg Kelly, the Nissan executive in charge of board compensation, were arrested in 2018. Many at the time believed Nissan's story. They thought Ghosn had somehow orchestrated the most complex and elaborate automotive financial fraud in the history of the world. But since then, more details have come to light, including Nissan's corporate lies and mistrust of its own staff. And now the tables appear to have turned. The public is starting to believe Carlos Ghosn here may have been the one who was innocent after all. It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. Personally, I have to say, I think there was a bit of tomfoolery, a bit of malfeasancy on both sides here, but most of it was on the side of Nissan. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching.